I share my screen. All right, welcome again. This is part of the Presidential Primary Sources Project. Today's program is Truman's First 100 Days, and it's being presented by the Truman Presidential Library and Museum. Mark and Angela are here to present to us. The Presidential Primary Sources Project is a partnership between Internet2, the National Park Service, and the National Archives. This is just a quick reminder that by participating today, you are agreeing to be recorded and archived as part of our program. We do keep recordings of our programs on our YouTube channel so that students and teachers can access them later. All right, we're excited to have you participate today. It's always a lot more fun and interactive if you participate. So I'm just going to go over a few expectations for participating. If you indicated that you wanted to be on video today, I have promoted you. If you would like video and I haven't promoted you already, just leave a message in the chat box and I will work on that once introductions are over. There'll also be some opportunity for you to use audio to respond or ask questions. So go ahead and locate the little raise hand icon. We'll let you know when those opportunities are, and if you use that icon, I will call on you and help you unmute. And then, of course, there's the chat box. Make sure you know where the chat box is. It looks like a little caption bubble. We'll use that a lot throughout the presentation to interact. That said, we want you to participate as much as possible, but please be respectful of all of the interactive tools in the chat box. Please make sure that any questions or answers are directly related to what we're talking about and what our presenter is asking. All right, just one last thanks for joining. This is our website, internet2.edu/ppsp. You can find our future programs here, as well as you can get access to our recordings. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Mark Adams, the Education Director at Truman Library, and I'm with my colleague, Angela Estep.
Hi, nice to have you here today. We're excited about the program.
And our program, as Therese said, is about Truman's first 100 days. We're going to nudge that out a little bit and probably do more like Truman's first 120 days, but close enough. We thought it was an appropriate topic to do at this time of year. As we all saw in January, President Biden's inauguration on January the 20th. And now he started his first 100 days. And if we do our math, he's probably around about 60 or 70 days, somewhere in there right now, at 65 days in on his presidency. So we're going to go back to 1945 and look at President Truman's first 100 days. And I think you'd be amazed at some of the things that unfold in those first 100, 120 days of his presidency. So let me share my screen. And we're going to be doing some interactive things throughout the whole presentation. For the most part, we're going to use the chat box, but we'll open it up for audio maybe at the end for questions and other comments. So let me get my presentation ready. And Angela, can you see that slide?
Not yet. There it is. Now we can.
All right, so we're going to start with this photograph. And we're going to tell you more about this photograph in a little bit, but I'd like to start out with some interaction. So in the chat box, whether you're a teacher or a student or a parent, it really doesn't matter. What do you see in that photograph? What do you notice in that photograph? Just type in anything that you think is going on in this photograph and we'll see what your responses are. Don't be shy. Anything you notice in that photo, just go ahead and type it. So somebody says a signing in from Farmington Falls, possibly. I'm going to hold off my answers as long as I can. What else do you notice in that photograph? Based off the Bible and the book. Very good. So you noticed the book that holding. Truman has glasses and Truman at the podium. So yeah, we've identified President Truman there with the bow tie and the glasses. And you're right, that is a Bible that he's holding. So what do you think he's doing? He also has his hand raised. What do you think he's doing there? Inauguration. Good job, Tyler. So inauguration. Now, usually when we see an inauguration, we also saw the inauguration of President Biden, and then we all saw President Trump and President Obama before that. They're usually happy occasions. How would you describe the mood in this photograph? Look at the people's faces. How would you describe their emotions? And Tyler is right, swearing into office. So Jada says surprised. Tyler says afraid. Not the normal emotions that you would consider with an inauguration. The guy in the back looks confused. He does look confused. And I've seen some different angles of this photograph. There's lots and lots of cameras there flashing. Anything else that you notice? What about the two ladies? The woman next to him looks like she was afraid. These are really good answers. Okay, now I'm going to test you out a little bit. We've identified that's Harry Truman with the bow tie and holding the Bible. That is correct. He's holding a Bible. Who do you think the two ladies are then? Just take a guess. Who do you think the two ladies are, do you think? If he's taking the oath of office, the inauguration to be president, relatives, yeah. So you're right. They're both relatives of Harry Truman. Who do you think they might be? And there's no wrong answers here. If you get it wrong, it's totally fine. His wife and daughter, excellent. So the lady in the center, just to the left on Harry Truman's left, is his wife, Bess Wallace Truman, and she's looking quite grim there. And then over on the right, in the dark jacket, two away from Harry Truman, is their daughter, Mary Margaret Truman. She went usually by Margaret. And she was born in 1924. So she's 21 in this picture. And that's important to remember when we come to another image later. So you guys are correct that this is President Truman becoming president on April 12th, 1945. So this is day one. We're going to be looking at those 120 days. And this is the first day. So why do you think they are all sad or confused? Why those emotions for a presidential inauguration? World War II is going on at the time. Yeah. What else? Is April when we usually inaugurate a president? I thought it was January. And back in the day, it was March. But why in the middle of April? What has happened? The war is going on, but that's not the reason why the inauguration is taking place in April. That's a good guess. The war is going on. Oh, very good. FDR has died. So earlier that day, the previous president, Franklin Roosevelt, has died. And at that time, Harry Truman was vice president. And because the president had died, he comes into office as the president. So he's already given, him and his wife, Bess, have already expressed their condolences to Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR's wife, the first lady. And now they're taking the oath of office. And it was just after 7 o'clock in the evening that they're rushed over to the White House and they take this oath of office to become president. So this is day one of those 100 days that we're going to look at. So a good starting point, but a very sad one. FDR was in his 4th term. Truman was vice president, but only vice president for about 3 months. He'd been inaugurated in January after the 1944 election, January of 1945. And here we are in April of 1945, just 82 days later, and FDR has died and Truman is taking the oath of office. So that's our first image. And now we're going to move forward from April into May. And Angela's going to talk through this for us. Can you see that, Angela, the timeline?
Yeah, they've got a square. Okay, yeah, there you go. Yeah, this is a quick overview of what we're going to look at. And as you just saw, he's sworn in as president in April. And you guys already noted that we were in the middle of World War II. So what's going to happen in May is Germany is going to surrender. Okay. In June, he's going to write a letter to his wife Bess and tell her how things are going. So we'll look at that in just a little bit. In July, he meets with the leaders of our allies in the other countries in Potsdam. He's going to meet with Stalin and with Churchill. And then they're going to make some decisions. How are they going to end that war? And in August, that decision is made. So in the National Archives or at the library, we have over 16 million documents that are from Truman's administration. And so we're going to use some of those today to try to show you the story and what's going on. So Mark, if you want to go to the next one, we're going to start with a letter that he receives 12 or 10 days after he's sworn in on April the 24th. If you can see this letter, we do have this one. I'd like for you to tell me, what do you see here? What do you notice about this document? We always like to use our primary documents. They don't always give us all of the information, but they help us to try to piece together a puzzle to try to understand it. All right, someone says it's a secret War Department, Washington. It's very urgent, very good. You see at the top, it does say secret, and it is from the War Department, and it is to, who can you tell who it is to?
Not to Bess.
Not to Bess. It says, dear, can you guys read it? You may not be able to read it.
I can go in a little closer.
Can you go? Okay, yeah, thank you. Now, can you see it? Dear who? Dear President, yes. So it's the War Department. It's a secret document. It's going to President Truman. Do you see a date? 24, so that's 12 days. Yes, okay, 1945. And then if you start looking at what's being said there, what does it say at that first paragraph? What's the very last few words that tells you? Yes, highly secret matter. He said, I think it's important that I talk with you as soon as possible. And if you look at the next paragraph, what do you see in there? What do you think it's going to be about? What is this highly secret matter? Foreign relations? Could be. Yeah, you're already looking ahead and saying, okay, if it's highly secret, it's about foreign relations. Maybe it's about some bombs, the atomic bombs. It could be. If you look down at the bottom, you can tell who sent this letter. If you can't read the name, you can tell what the title is. Secretary of War, yes. So this is Henry Stimson. He's the Secretary of War. He sent this to the president 12 days and said, hey, we need to talk, okay? And if you see at the bottom, what is President Truman? Can you see a little handwritten note there? I know it's in cursive. I don't know if you can read that.
Whoops, sorry. There we go.
Two Harrys got, oh, okay. Yeah, it's Henry. The first one is Harry Truman and then Henry Stimson. So if you can't read that, I'll read it for you. It says Matt, okay. And this is signed by HST. See those initials at the bottom of the handwritten note? That's Harry S. Truman. He says, Matt, put on list tomorrow, Wednesday, 25th. So he's taking this seriously. And he's going to go ahead and meet with Mr. Stimson and see what is this secret thing that he's talking about. And you've already mentioned the bombs. And you're absolutely right. The Manhattan Project has been going on. President Truman was vice president for 82 days. He never really was in the loop about what was going on. So now that he's president, he needs to know about this new weapon that they have been developing since we are in World War II. Okay. So with that, we are going to go because in May, something else happens. And if you can read this headline, 25 days after he's been sworn in, what does it say? What's going on? What's the headline? Today, VE Day. Does anyone know? What does that mean? You can see the name of the newspaper, but what is VE Day? Anyone know? Ah, Germany surrendered. Yes, as you guys have stated, World War II is going on, and VE Day happens on May the 7th, okay, which happens to be just right before Harry Truman's birthday. And Germany surrenders. All right, can you see in there, what is VE? So anybody have a guess for VE? I think it tells you in that first paragraph. I think you can see there. Can you read that? Victory. Victory where? England or, yeah, or Europe. Yeah, so the war was going on in Europe. The war was going on in Japan. And when Germany surrenders, okay, that they call that the Victory in Europe Day. So if you look on here, he works, if you look in the very next paragraph, you can see where he works with the leaders of our allies, and they decide they're all going to make this announcement at the same time. Can you see who the leaders are, the other allies that he's working with? It's in that second paragraph. Yep, Churchill, yes, definitely, and Stalin, absolutely. So we have Prime Minister Churchill in England, and then we have Stalin in Moscow, and Truman, and they all agreed that they were going to make this announcement that Germany has unconditionally surrendered on May the 7th. This is 25 days after Truman has been in office, and this is a great day. The war is not over, however, but as time moves on, he writes a letter to Brest. How do you think he's feeling after the surrender of Germany and his birthday, May the 8th? How do you think he's feeling? Pretty happy, yeah. And Mark's going to share with you a letter that he wrote to his wife, Bess, about how he's feeling about this.
Thank you, Angela. So now we're moving forward into June. So about halfway through our 100 days. And this is June the 6th, 55 days after he's been sworn in as president. And take a look at that letter. The original letter's there on the left with the cursive handwriting. But you will also see we've got a typed version for you to read. Just as a quick note, at the library in our archives, we have more than 1,300 letters written by Harry Truman to his wife, Bess, from when they were dating in 1910, all the way through the rest of their lives. And we have all of those on our website, digitized for you to read. We've chosen one today, and that's hard to do. And I wanted to look at these 3 paragraphs and then a little note at the end as well. So in this first paragraph, he says, I'm going to read it, this first paragraph. I'm getting better organized now. My office force soon will be shaken down, and so will my cabinet when I've gotten states straightened out. War and Navy I shall let alone until the Japanese are out of the picture. So the war is still going on in Japan. The war is over in Europe. And he's reorganizing and changing his cabinet, but he wants to leave the war and the Navy alone because the war's still going on. Now, I want you to look at this second paragraph and read it yourself if you can. And is there anything that surprises you in this second paragraph? And I will tell you, one job that he had in the 1920s, 20 years before, was that he was the county commissioner or county judge for Jackson County, Missouri, where Independence is. So Jackson County is in Missouri, close, and then Jackson County includes Kansas City as well as Independence. So that's where he's from, and it's where Bess is actually, is where he's writing to. He's writing to Bess in Independence, Missouri, her hometown and where he lives when he's not in the White House. So that was the county that he was in charge of in the 1920s as the county commissioner or county judge. So anything in that second paragraph that surprises you? I'll give you a second, and I'll read it in case you can't see it on the screen. It won't be long until I sit back and study the whole picture and tell them what is to be done in each department. When things come to that stage, there'll be no more to this job than there was to running Jackson County and not any more worry. So what is he saying about the job of president? Yeah, the party is further down. I'm focusing on this other information, but I'm glad that you read the smaller writing. What is he saying about running the country as president? Anything surprising there? It was a tough job, but what does he say about it compared to Jackson County, where he used to be in charge 20 years before? He says, when things come to that stage, there'll be no more to this job than there was to running Jackson County and not any more worry. It'll be about the same amount of work. Very good. So it's not going to be any more difficult than running a county. Do you think that's surprising? I do. I think that's pretty surprising that he thinks that running a county will be the same as being president. Such more responsibility. And in fact, he recognizes these headaches, these responsibilities in the next paragraph. He says foreign relations, national finances, reconversion, post-war military policy will be the big headaches. And they can all be solved if Congress decides to help me do a bang-up job. And I believe they will do that. So those things, the foreign relations, national finances, post-war military policy, a county politician wouldn't have to worry about any of those things. So he's kind of contradicting himself a little bit, but he thinks that Congress is going to help him and they will cooperate. And I think he'll find later in his administration, that's probably not going to be true. In fact, when he campaigns for re-election in 1948, most of the time in that campaign, he complains about Congress. So that's maybe a little bit naive and a little bit surprising. And then I wanted to point out this last sentence, and I went too fast. Below the small paragraph, he finishes off his letter by saying, tell my baby I was glad to talk to her last night, as well as to her mama. Lots of love, Harry. Now, this letter is to his wife, Bess. So who is he talking about when he says, tell my baby I was glad to talk to her last night? Who is the baby? His daughter. But his daughter was how old on that very first photograph in April? She was in that photograph. Yeah, she was 21, well remembered. Well, at 21 years of age, he's still referring to her as his baby. And Margaret Truman is her name. And she says even later in life that she kind of was spoiled by Harry Truman, more so than her mother, who was more of the disciplinarian. And so you can tell Harry's affection towards her. He still refers to her as a baby. Now, I've got 3 daughters myself, and if I referred to any of them as being a baby, I think they'd actually be upset. So, because they're a little bit older, and in their 2 of them are in their 20s, they wouldn't like to be called a baby, but that was an affectionate term. And obviously he had talked to her on the phone the night before. So that's a neat letter, and it shows you that maybe he's a little bit naive about what he has to do as president with all of these things going on in the world. So now he plans for a trip to Europe himself. So our next part is now 95 days after he's sworn in. So we're getting close to the 100. And I'm just moving the chat box out of the way a little bit. I don't know if it's covering you guys or not. So here he is on the left with the 2 leaders that we mentioned in the newspaper in May. Can you remind me who those are? Who's standing on his left and right? And this photograph has taken place in Germany. He's flown to Berlin. Well, he actually takes a ship and then he takes a train to Berlin. Stalin and Churchill. So Stalin is in the white jacket on your right, Harry Truman's left. And then Churchill is on our left on Harry Truman's right. And so they're the leaders of the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union. And the chat box is in the way. So thank you for telling me. I'm going to move it up there. How's that? So they're meeting in Germany in the suburbs of Berlin at Potsdam. And they're going to be discussing what to do at the end of the war. And in fact, also what to do with Japan. And they issue a declaration to the Japanese. While they are there, Truman receives this 14-page report. And on the last page of that 14-page report, he receives this sketch. And so this sketch is on the right side of the screen. So what do you notice in this sketch? What do you notice on this sketch? Cloud drawings, very good. What else do you notice? The weather. You guys are really good, and I appreciate your cooperation and participation. The time, the degree angles. I'll scroll up just a little bit so you can see a bit more. Anything, there's my doorbell ringing. I'm going to ignore that. Anything else that you can see there? What else do you notice? The date, right? July 16th, 1945. And that's the date, the day after Truman arrives at Potsdam. It's not an island, although I can see why you would say that. It does say cloud drawing. So what type of cloud are we looking at? Thinking back to that letter that he received in April from Henry Stimson, what do you think is going on here? That's not a storm. I'm going to go closer in because there's some handwritten information. It's written in cursive, so it might be a little tricky to read, but that's a little bit closer to you to read to the left of the cloud. Plans for the bombing, almost. There's some cursive writing there right underneath where it says cloud drawings. It's a little tricky to read. I wonder if you can read any of that. And it's harder and harder to read cursive. It's a bomb plume being drawn. And it says in cursive, first atomic bomb explosion, Alamogordo, New Mexico. Sketches from B-29, that's a type of plane, flying at 30,000 feet, about 15 miles away. So what he has in this report is a sketch of the very first atomic bomb explosion. So what it means is the very first test was a success. They weren't sure it was going to be a success. And even though they knew about it in April, They weren't sure how successful it was going to be. So here we are. We have a successful test of the atomic bomb. And so there's Truman in Germany when he gets this information at this big conference with these other world leaders. And he tells Winston Churchill of the United Kingdom all about the project and all about the success. And they start to discuss how they could use it against Japan to end the war as quickly as possible. And that was Truman's main motivation, was to end the war as quickly as possible to save as many American lives as possible. However, when it came to Stalin, he didn't give him as much information. There was already some tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. And although they were allies during World War II, there'd already been some disagreements about what would happen to the countries in Europe at the end of the war and whether the Soviet troops would move back and allow those countries to become democratic nations or not. So the Red Army from the Soviet Union was already in places like Poland and Romania and the Czech Republic and places like that in Eastern Europe. And so Truman was a little bit more wary with Stalin, and he decided just to give him a limited amount of information and just told them that they had a new weapon that they were considering using against Japan and didn't go into any detail. Now, we did find out many, many, many years later that Stalin, in fact, knew a lot more than Truman realized, because he had spies in New Mexico that were reporting back the successful test to Stalin. But we didn't know that at the time, and Truman didn't know that at the time about those spies in New Mexico. So this is the very first test. As I mentioned, it comes with a 14-page report. That whole report goes through and describes what happens in a very reader-friendly way. And it's sent to Henry Stimson, who we met in April with that letter, the Secretary of War. The report is sent to him by General Lieutenant Groves, who's in charge of the Manhattan Project and in charge of the scientists. And he sends this 14-page report describing everything that happened. And they're excited. They're over it's been more successful than they anticipated. And they're really excited about the success. And now Truman describes it in a letter in his diary as an ace in the hole. He has this extra weapon now that he can use to end the war in Japan. And so that's going to be what we look at for July. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing here, and then I will launch a separate window. We'll see if this works to launch our video because we have a video for August. So this is August 6th, a little bit after the 100 days that we talked about. Let me go full screen and let's see if this works. And Andrew, if you can just let me know that it's working correctly. Can you see the video before I press play?
Yes, we can.
That's a good sign. Here we go.
Okay.
A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. The Japanese began the war from the air at Pearl Harbor. They have been repaid many-fold, and the end is not yet. With this bomb, we have now added a new and revolutionary increase in destruction to supplement the growing power of our armed forces. In their present form, these bombs are now in production, and even more powerful forms are in development. It is an atomic bomb. It is a harnessing of the basic power of the universe. The force from which the sun draws its power has been loosed against those who brought war to the Far East. We are now prepared to destroy more rapidly and completely every productive enterprise the Japanese have in any city. We shall destroy their docks, their factories, and their communications. Let there be no mistake. We shall completely destroy Japan's power to make war. It was to spare the Japanese people from utter destruction that the ultimatum of July the 26th was issued at Potsdam. Their leaders promptly rejected that ultimatum. If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. Behind this air attack will follow sea and land forces in such numbers and power as they have not yet seen, and with the fighting skill of which they are already well aware.
Okay. Very determined President Truman there. Could you tell where he was when he was making that statement? Let me get my chat box back up. Where do you think he was? Was there anything that gave you a clue in the background? And I probably should have warned you to look at that ahead of time. Was there anything that gave you a clue about where he might have been speaking from? That is available on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it again at some point. Anybody see anything behind him that might have given a clue? There was a round window. So where do you think he might have been? He was actually on a ship. He had left Germany, and he was on the ship heading back to the United States after the conference was over by this point in August the 6th. And he actually makes that statement from the ship sailing back to the United States. He does stop off in Great Britain before he leaves to meet the king. And then he sails on back to the United States. So it's quite remarkable that all of these decisions are made while he's actually out of the country. So any questions? That just to wrap up, that was August 6th. I think we said that was about 106 days in or something. There's the second bomb on August 9th, and then Japan surrenders on August 15th. So if just about 120, 125 days after he becomes president, Germany has surrendered in May. Japan surrenders in August. It's an incredibly busy and tumultuous first 100, 120 days, really unprecedented for any president to face up to so many things, many out of his own control. These things are just happening anyway, and he happens to be the president. So really tumultuous summer, if you think of it, April, May, June, July, and then into August. So that's how those first 100, 120 days end with a Japanese surrender. And then in early September, the Japanese come to Tokyo Bay on the USS Missouri, and they sign the official surrender documents in the early part of September. So with that, that's the end of our presentation in terms of sharing our sources. If you've got any questions or other things you want to ask Angela and I about, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. And thank you for your participation.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Mark or for Angela?
How did Truman not find out about the New Mexico spies? That's a really good question. They really didn't have the same kind of network we have today with the CIA and the FBI. In fact, Truman sets up the CIA not long after this. But at that time, if you think of what we call the intelligence community today, those people looking out at other countries and looking for spies and things like that, that kind of network didn't really exist. They had some that were involved, spies in Germany and spies in other countries, and actually listening to messages from other countries, but they really didn't have the same extensive network that we have today. So that's something that comes to haunt Truman a little bit later, because he's accused of being soft on communism by McCarthy. And there's a really increase in discovery of spies. That's a whole other episode of the Truman administration a little bit later than these 100 days. So what he inherited from FDR was really a low capability of detecting those things. How did Stalin use that information? Very simple answer to that is that the Soviet Union actually developed their own atomic bomb. So before the 1940s were out, the Soviet Union had in fact tested their own atomic weapons and had their own atomic weaponry. And it really led to an arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union as they both developed first atomic bombs, and then in the 1950s, hydrogen bombs. And really that was part of the Cold War, as both sides developed more and more weapons pointing at each other, and they became more and more enemies rather than allies like they had been in World War II. So good questions. Yeah, he developed their own technology and their own weapons.
All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, I just want to take some time to thank Mark and Angela. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today. And thank you for everybody who attended. It was great to have you.
And thank you for the feedback, Gabrielle.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
All right, have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Therese.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.